Coming up next on Another View, the Trayvon Martin tragedy. It's a rapidly evolving story, but some facts are indisputable. Trayvon Martin, an unarmed African-American teen carrying Skittles and an iced tea and wearing a hoodie, was shot and killed by George Zimmerman, a Hispanic neighborhood watch participant. Zimmerman has not been charged for the shooting, claiming self-defense under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. The case has evoked emotions ranging the gamut from anger and frustration to renewed calls for racial harmony. Thoughtful discussion about the killing of Trayvon Martin is next from our Another View Roundtable, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Welcome to Another View. Before we get into our discussion, I just want to give a special hello and shout out to the teachers, the 100 teachers who attended our teacher town hall at WHRO this week. I had a great time, and we all had a great conversation talking about what to do about the dropout rate and on-time graduation in Hampton Roads. And you'll be able to see the show that we actually taped Wednesday night on May the 6th at 6 p.m. on WHRO TV 15. So hi out there, all you hardworking teachers. We really appreciate you. So today we have a special edition of the Another View Roundtable, and we're talking about the Trayvon Martin tragedy. It's a situation that has shocked the nation and caused people to literally take to the streets and protest. The killing of this young man has opened up the conversation about race in America and has African-American parents of young men reinforcing the talk about how a black man must behave in public. Our roundtable is here. Roger Chesley, columnist for the Virginian-Pilot, and you can read his columns every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Hi, Roger.
Hello, Barbara.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. Political science professor from Norfolk State University, Carol Pretlow. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Barbara.
Glad to have you here today. Bill Thomas, who is our conservative voice and community activist. How you doing, Bill?
Life is beautiful.
Life is beautiful, absolutely. And journalist, author, and talk show host Wil LaVeist. And you can hear Will's program every Wednesday at noon on WHRV-FM, Hampton University Radio. How you doing, Will?
Great, always a pleasure.
Good. Now, before we get started, Lisa Godley brings us up to date on the story of Trayvon Martin.
On February 26, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin is shot and killed while walking home from a convenience store in Sanford, Florida. According to Sanford police, 28-year-old George Zimmerman, who was serving in the role of neighborhood watch captain, is found armed with a handgun standing over the unarmed teenager. Several neighbors report to police that they heard a scuffle, then a cry for help, then a gunshot.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right, what is your...
Zimmerman tells police he killed Martin in self-defense and is not charged. With details still sketchy, the case does not receive coverage at the national level. On March 8th, Trayvon's parents, Tracy Martin and Sabrina Fulton, call for the arrest and prosecution of George Zimmerman. A petition is created on change.org. On March 17th, Sanford police released 911 tapes that detail Zimmerman's calls to them prior to the shooting. This raises questions about Zimmerman's claims of self-defense. A police dispatcher is clearly heard telling George Zimmerman not to follow Trayvon Martin.
Okay, which entrance is that he's heading towards? The back entrance. Are you following him? Yeah, okay, we don't need you to do that. Okay.
2 days later, on March 19th, Trayvon's parents renewed pleas for Zimmerman's arrest. The FBI and Justice Department also opened investigations into how the case was handled. The same day, a 16-year-old girl details the last moments of Trayvon Martin's life. She says Martin was on the phone with her when George Zimmerman began following him. She recounted that she told Martin to run. Then she heard some pushing, and then the line went dead. On March 20th, the state attorney announces that the Seminole County grand jury would investigate the Trayvon Martin case. On March 22nd, Sanford Police Chief Bill Lee temporarily steps down, calling his role as leader of the department a distraction from the investigation. That same day, debate ignites over Florida's controversial Stand Your Ground law, which some say makes prosecuting Zimmerman harder. The very next day, President Barack Obama addresses the incident, calling on the nation to do some soul-searching and commends authorities for looking further into the case. He also speaks about Trayvon Martin in personal terms.
But my main message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
On March 26, Zimmerman's legal advisor, Craig Sooner, announces that Zimmerman fears for his life. On March 27th, Sanford Police released Zimmerman's account of the events. In those statements, Zimmerman says he lost track of Trayvon and as he walked back to his car was approached from behind and attacked by the teenager. That same day, news reports state that Trayvon Martin was suspended from school for possessing traces of marijuana. The Martin family attorney speaks out, calling this irrelevant to the case. On March 29th, police released surveillance video of Zimmerman in handcuffs. In the video, he does not appear to be bloody or have bruises consistent with a life or death struggle. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
So, Roger, do you remember your initial reaction when you first heard about the Trayvon case?
Yeah, when I first heard about the case and first read about the case, it really hadn't gotten into the national consciousness yet, and that's the way some of these cases work out sometimes. And a couple of things on that. You wonder if it hadn't gotten into the national consciousness, would there be so much official investigation now? So I know one of the criticisms has been a lot of people get killed across the country in any given week. Why is there so much notoriety about this case? But on the flip side, there's the fear that if there hadn't been so much notoriety to this case, that maybe there wouldn't be a proper investigation into it. It seems almost ludicrous that he would have never been arrested in this case, at least initially, given the facts that initially came out. And there have been some reports that one of the police investigators wanted to arrest him that night, but was told not to.
Well, do you think that the reason that this has resonated so much is because of the fact that Zimmerman has not been arrested?
Absolutely. I think that's the big piece right here. I mean, as I started to hear about it, as bloggers began talking about it, and radio show hosts like this one, like mine, I mean, that was the big piece. How can a young man be shot dead? And we've gone, how many months, and we still don't know all of the facts, and no one is arrested? I mean, that just... Because
this actually happened on February 26th.
Exactly.
Which is a month ago now, but just now coming out. Bill, were you surprised?
No.
Why?
It happens every day. We are... It's tragic. Some people have been talking about this for years, and nothing ever gets done about it.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about other African-American males who have been killed.
Oh, absolutely.
But do you think the assumption then, let me ask you, is that there is some sort of justice that happens with them?
No. I think that we have gone far too long in this. Race does matter. A lot of people don't want to talk about it on the right and on the left. I can remember when my son was going down to play in a bowl game in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he decided to drive with me. And I was laying down in the car, and here's a kid that's a football player, UVA, all academic, ACC. He got pulled over on 58 by a policeman. A policeman walks up to the car. He rolls the window down. Hey, boy, because he couldn't see me. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? But they have no respect for our young black kids. And the government schools, I just think it's across the board. And I wrote an article that got some acclaim 20 years ago and said that our kids were in danger. Their lives are in danger because we take these tragic deaths, and as far as I can count, the last time there's 252,000 over the last 18 years, and we just let it go.
Carol, you're on a college campus. You're hearing young people talking about this. What are they saying?
Yes, I definitely have heard young people talking about it, and we had a prayer vigil the other night, and everybody's heart went out to the family, and of course, we were just absolutely appalled by the situation. I think many of the young people on the campus are bought into the idea that this is a post-racial society, and they had said that prior to this event, and now there are questions. Wait a minute, maybe it's not a post-racial society. Maybe there is something that we can do to get this process to get people treated more equitably in the system.
Do you all think this whole post-racial society idea, we know that came about as President Obama was voted into office, but do you also think it has to do with socioeconomics in terms of who believes it and who doesn't, and how it's reacting?
I've said it for years. It's socioeconomic. It's a lot of black folks have gotten over integration as well, and how they classify themselves. It's class, totally. Mm-hmm. It's economically metered in terms of how people see things.
But the issue is you can't always tell. I mean, race plays a big part in that, because when you're walking down the street, you don't know necessarily what somebody's socio-economic level is. But you can tell, okay, that person's black, that person's white, that person's Asian, that person's Latino.
But my point was also that there's a group of people who seem to think that we, just like you say, Carol, we don't have this issue any longer. So I guess my question is, are there groups of people who actually live in certain communities who every day still live this? And then there's another group of people out there who think everything's okay.
But I think,
go ahead,
just as importantly, the media played into this. The idea that when Obama was elected, we've done something great, and not as emphasizing his qualifications, but saying, oh, wow, we're wonderful. We elected a black person as president, and that means we are no longer racist. And somehow that feeling or that attitude I think it crosses class and economic lines. That I hear people say that all the time downtown Norfolk. It's like, what world do you live in?
I mean, I think that for some individuals, for a lot of individuals and how they interact in their daily lives, that they can very much say that they live a post-racial existence, because they don't interact and have those kinds of baggages, racial baggages. They're working to overcome them. You see it in action in their lives. Maybe they have they're in multiracial relationships. But I think for the most part, as a society, it's really just a feel-good myth, put a Band-Aid on something, because you can't get to a post-racial existence unless you've gone through the process, the long, slog, hard process of being post-racial. That's why in one of the pieces I've written for urbanfaith.com, a blog that I write for, I said that what's needed and what we've been needing is to have a systematic process of going through anti-racism so that we can unlearn these things, because it took us 400 plus years to get here. You need a process. You need a process to unlearn this.
Oh my God!
You need a process to unlearn this. You can't just put a Band-Aid and say, we got a president and we're here.
Will is shaking his head.
In my judgment, you don't need any of that stuff. That's never going to happen. The dynamics and the elements that are going to separate us to the good, moral, decent people we are is that, number one, we leave white people alone in terms of trying to do the things that we need to do for ourselves, raise our families, create businesses, get our kids out of these crummy government schools, defend ourselves with the Second Amendment. Power concedes nothing without a demand, nothing. And until people see us as a powerless, impotent people that don't respect the Second Amendment, that don't do things that are going to say, well, if I'm sitting up on the top of Norfolk Southern building, and if Roger and I are sitting down and they look down 20 stories and see there's just two black people down there. But if they get close to me and say, well, they're the two people that we know that defend themselves, that defend their communities, that can defend their lives and have these morals and values, we're seen as a morally degenerate people. That's how they view us. That's why that fool thought he had a right to take that kid's life.
Well, if you listen to his comment, it's very much indicative of somebody who has come up in this systematic racist society. If you're an African-American person, you're going to have some kind of victim tendencies. You're going to see yourself as trying to overcome and seeing yourself as, let's leave white people alone. If you're white, you're going to see, hey, I'm oblivious to this. I have a false sense of superiority. It's not about leaving people alone. It's about understanding how we all come to this table as Americans and working our way through this to get to a point where we're respecting each other and then we can live according to what our Constitution says, that we all have a right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Yeah. That's the essence of what our Constitution is.
But Carol, let me ask you then, how do we get people to really start honestly talking about race? Because, you know, all of us, I believe, have been in situations where something has come up and there's been uncomfortableness. There's been a lack of participation because, we don't want to go there.
I think we haven't wanted to go there, but I think now we're forced to go there. And that means that in our community groups, in our colleges, our universities, our small book clubs, or whatever organizations we begin talking about it, but then we come up with some strategies to actually go beyond this.
Roger's talking enough?
It's hard to say. It's how we deal with each other. And let's face it, you know, sometimes we have stereotypes about people that we don't know, in fact, to try to protect ourselves. When you are walking on certain streets, you have to decide, does that particular individual want to do me harm? And no matter what race you are, you're always concerned about, in different neighborhoods where you may not be familiar with, am I safe here? I think it's less of an issue if you're in a car, but it's much more so if you're on public transportation, if you are walking on a street somewhere, if you are downtown and there is a large group around. You know, what have I been conditioned to by media, by my friends, by what I've read, and by what I've experienced in my own life. Mm-hmm. And if we're honest with ourselves, we'll also say that sometimes we're frightened even around people of our own color. And that is an issue that I think if we were truthful about it, that we would say, yeah, there are certain situations where I am fearful.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We're talking about the Trayvon Martin situation, and we're talking about race relations in America. Give us a call if you'd like to join the respectful conversation that we're having. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240.
No, I got to follow what he said about what I said, Bill, because it's not true. And it's liberal Negroes like you that keep us in this position that we're in. The part that I'm saying is that there's some black people we need to leave alone. It's about individual rights. It's about my ability to take care of me, my family, and what Roger was just talking about. When I walk down the street, who am I as an individual? Not some collective body that's got to go out and have some meeting or some discussion to get somebody to like me. Let me figure this. I don't want people to like me. I want people to fear me because I have education, I have the Second Amendment on me, and I'm not scared of anything. So that is exactly what I want. I don't want the government, I don't want your government doing anything for me.
See, what I'm saying is that there are people who are doing this work. For example, Hampton Unity Commission. They had an incident similar out here some years ago, the Angela Reedy case. And what came out of that, they said, let's put together something systematically where people can come in and start to understand these issues. There are plenty. I know there's one, the antiracism.mcc.org, antiracism.mcc.org, where people are bringing individuals in to learn about these things and really understand it, because it goes beyond just black and white. There's also Native Americans.
Well, I mean,
there's also Hispanics. There's also Asian Indians. I mean, and we are moving rapidly into a situation where the country is becoming more and more diverse. If we don't have an understanding of how we interact with each other, how are we going to be successful in interacting? Roger is absolutely right. He said, where do we learn this stuff? We learned it at home. We learned it in church. We learned it in school. So we can unlearn it at church, at the schools, at home.
Let me ask you a question.
Can I just jump in? And one of the best ways to unlearn it, when you deal with people as an abstract, you tend to think of the worst about them. But when you have to deal with them individually, when you know something about them, then you can't say, well, all black people are bad. Well, wait a minute. But I know some black people. But wait a minute. I know some black people who are decent. And it's not all white people are racist. Well, wait a minute. That person helped me out when I was maybe having some troubles, and they went to bat for me. And so when you have to deal with people as individuals, when you know more people who are not necessarily the same color, the same religion, the same
well, could you say then that part of the issue in terms of us coming together as a society, multiracial society, is the fact that there are still pockets where we don't interact with each other. I mean, and I'm talking about from the highest to the lowest, where you could go for a full day and never interact with someone outside of your race. Carol.
That's true. And I think this is difficult because I think each of us as individuals has characteristics and problems and approaches that may be subject to examination. I tend to be an isolationist almost, and I think, I'm perfectly fine as long as I don't bother anybody. Am I going to get bothered? That probably is not a protective device because, as I was talking to you earlier, I encountered something in downtown Norfolk that...
Share that story with us, Carol, please.
I live in downtown Norfolk, and I was coming home one evening, and it was about 5 or 6 o'clock. I was coming from school. Now, I might look like a homeless person. Yeah, Roger, no comment from you. But here I was with all my bags and my books and a smoothie. And as I get up to the door to put my code in the door, I get stopped by a young officer who says, excuse me, do you live in this building? And I said that I do. And he says, I've patrolled here for 11 plus years and I've never seen you before. Well, I resisted the urge to be sarcastic and explain that there are 250,000 people in Norfolk, and I doubt he knew every one of them. But I said, I understand, sir. I continue to put the code in. I open the door, and he says, just because you know the code does not mean that you live here. And I say, okay. I said, you're certainly right, sir. Have a good evening. I close the door, and I get in. It was a debilitating experience for me, and I called my friend Diane, and I said, something has just happened, and I feel bad because I don't know what I did. See, we internalize, and I kept saying, well, what did I do? Well, maybe I shouldn't have had so many bags, but I did have the books, and maybe if I had not had the smoothie. So you start asking, what did I do? And this happens on an individual level. So you go home, and instead of sharing or collaborating, except for Diane and a few at work, I didn't tell the story because I was like, well, maybe it was me. Maybe, and I think we do that. Now, that might occur because I don't care who you are, teacher, lawyer, doctor, Indian chief. When it happens, you begin to internalize and say, okay, next time I will button my jacket. Next time, I won't have so many bags. But you begin to internalize, and I think that's the problem.
Wear a hoodie.
Well, but that does bring us to the talk. You know that African American families have with their sons, in particular, for that very reason. You're talking about the next time I won't button my jacket. Next time I won't wear a hoodie. Do you guys remember? Did your parents have the talk with
my
you?
parents, growing up in D.C., it was a fairly, it was majority black, but a significant amount of whites. And by that time, the department, though not fully integrated, certainly had its share of black and white officers and other officers on the department. And it was not, at the time when I was growing up, I don't recall having that. Now, I had a father who was a retired police officer. And, there were certain things we knew to be respectful to all adults. So
you didn't get to keep your hands on the steering wheel and say yes sir, no sir, and things of that sort.
I knew that Prince George's County Police, you were not supposed to do certain things in PG County at that time. It was very tough. People had been shot by the department. But I can't recall necessarily having it in quite the formal, official way that I've heard of.
What about you, Will?
I certainly did, getting it coming up in Brooklyn and in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn. My father certainly talked to me about that. My mother certainly talked to me about that. And unfortunately, their biggest fear and concern, even though I was coming up in a very volatile time of being going through busing and fighting my way home, fighting my way in, their biggest concern very much was that I would be the victim of black-on-black crime. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when I sat down and had to talk with my sons, who are in their 20s now, I certainly had that same concern, because you can raise your sons, your daughters as well as they can, and to handle themselves and to present themselves in a proper way, and they will end up suffering for the guilty. And that's a fact. And that's one of the things that, again, in this case, that we really need to look at as to, again, why do people come to the table with certain perceptions? And if they're isolated in their own communities, how are we going to, as a society, get ourselves to a point where if we have to interact, how can we sort of safeguard that people are not coming with all of these stereotypes that can end up putting me 6 feet under?
Bill, did you have to talk with your kids?
I
and
sure
did.
Did
Your parents have to talk with you?
Well, we had to talk. We were in a military environment, so I was kind of like Roger there. We didn't have to deal with it at home, but away from home, in Natchez, Mississippi, we were told you couldn't look at white women. When they walked down the street, you had to get off and get on the street. When you got in the grocery store line, if they came and looked at you, if a white man told you to do something, it was yes, sir, no, sir. Don't look them in the eye. Now, my daddy didn't tell me to do that. My in-laws in Mississippi, because my dad was just the opposite way. He said you do what you got to do and just deal with it. But no, we were taught, and I told my kids, don't go.
I was going to say, so then how did you bring it to the next generation?
My kids did not drive a car alone until they were seniors in high school. I wouldn't allow them to go to Virginia Beach at night. I wouldn't allow them to go to Chesapeake at night, and I wouldn't allow them to go to Norfolk for 2 different reasons. We figured the police were biased in Virginia Beach, and they were biased in Chesapeake. And they were 2 big kids, and I just said, no, it's not permissible. We had to talk.
Okay, let's go to the phones. Dawn joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Dawn. You're on the air.
Hi there. How are you doing today?
Okay.
I'm just calling in to answer to the question of to answer the idea that we live in a post-racial era. I work in education. I've worked with low-income schools and higher-income schools, so I've kind of seen the field. And I've actually had to explain to friends of mine that it does exist still, because when you're in a certain circle and that's all that you're exposed to day in and day out, sometimes you just don't see it anymore. And I think also that racism is just such a dirty stain on our past, especially in the South, that I think a lot of people want to believe that it's over, because that's one thing that we don't have to feel bad about anymore, because we've accomplished something, we've gone over it. And I just wanted to attest to the fact that there are people out there who do see it and who do try to fight it when they see it.
That's John. Thanks for that call. I do want to ask you a question, though, too. Do you think that talking about it makes it better or worse?
It really, I do think it makes it better, because people hide their feelings so much. I'm Caucasian. I work with a lot of black children, and I felt mistrust from those parents initially, because they don't know if I'm going to treat their children how I should be treating them because of their color. And once they've opened up to me and I've opened up to them, and we've actually been able to talk about it when situations do occur that need to be talked about, it makes everything better.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think that what's really important is just that we express to each other, you know what, I'm committed to loving you, period. And it's just, I'm sorry, I've never been on the radio before.
That's fine. You're doing fine, Dawn. Thank you so much for your call. We really appreciate it and appreciate your perspective. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. If you're just joining us, this is the Another View Roundtable, and we're discussing the ramifications of the killing of Trayvon Martin with Virginian-Pilot's columnist Roger Chesley, NSU political science professor Carol Pretlow, community activist Bill Thomas, and journalist, author, and talk show host Wil LaVeist. Let's talk to Karen from Norfolk. Hi, Karen. You're on the air.
Yes. Hi. I just wanted to say, I wanted to talk about the need for parents and guardians to train our young people how to conduct themselves in the public square. But I wanted to say to the professor from Norfolk State, because I live in the ghetto, I have a property in the ghetto, I wanted to tell you that you put the fear of God into that police officer, and he knew he had made a mistake, and he was trying to clean it up the best way he could, because if he really didn't respect you, my dear, he would have taken you down right there on the sidewalk.
Amen.
So you put the fear in him. He just didn't know what to do with it. And I wanted to say about the Trayvon Martin situation. No, Trayvon did not deserve to die, but we have to train our young people, parents and guardians, how to handle yourself in the public square, because the cooler you can bring down that conflict with respectful talk and doing what the security guard needs for you to do until the police officer comes. I know that might be insulting for black men, but if you can make the situation as calm and as cool as you can until the law enforcement come, it is a better situation. When our young men wear saggy pants and hoods on their head, I'm right here in the ghetto, I am threatened. When I see you walking down the street with your pants hanging saggy and a hood on your head and a pit bull in your hand, I don't know if you're coming after me or if you're just trying to get to the corner store. So guardians and parents, we have to help our young people with their presentation and how to handle themselves in the public square.
Karen, thank you so much for that call. We really appreciate it. Bill, you want to react?
Oh, I think she's right, but I think that in this particular case, in my judgment, if he would have just done what she asked him to do, I think the police would have came there and beat him, and it'll be even worse for him.
You're saying for Trayvon, if he had waited for the cops to get there.
Well, part of my concern is, in reading as much as I have about the case, I still don't know whether Mr. Zimmerman's vehicle was marked in any way to suggest that he was neighborhood watch.
Exactly.
And if you are a young man walking on the street, let's be in Mr. Martin's, let's be in Trayvon's shoes now. You don't know who this guy is.
Defend yourself.
What if he had a gun?
Amen.
And he had shot Mr. Zimmerman? Would he have been able to use the stand your ground law in his defense? Because he doesn't know who this guy is. And that's all the more important why Mr. Zimmerman should have stayed in the SUV in the first place. Because he does not have police powers. He is just a regular citizen, and he wasn't supposed the guidelines or the recommendations are that if you are a neighborhood watch, you don't carry a weapon.
You don't carry a weapon, and you're not supposed to pursue, and the cops asked him not to pursue too. Will.
Exactly, and that's why in some of this and not knowing all of what the details are, we get some things sort of mixed up, because she's correct when you're dealing with law enforcement, certain way you ought to handle yourself. But this is not who Zimmerman was. He wasn't law enforcement. So this is why it goes back to how is it that we have these perceptions of each other and who looks suspicious and who doesn't. How did we learn this, and how can we unlearn it? Because it's only going to happen again. I told you, I grew up in Brooklyn. I remember Yusef Hawkins. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is only going to happen again. He was in a neighborhood, a white neighborhood, perceptions about who should be here, who shouldn't, and he ends up losing his life.
If Mr. Martin would have been armed, he'd be alive today.
Okay.
My question is back to the police and what happened when they arrived. There was probable cause to arrest Zimmerman. Why couldn't they have used that standard right then and there? And I'm not saying that he should have been convicted right then and there, but there was probable cause to arrest him. They could have done it then and then decided whether they were going to press charges.
Well, and I think that's the whole fur around it. It's because
what happened to probable cause in our legal system?
Exactly. Chris joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Chris. You're on the air.
Hi, yeah. My name's Chris. I'm an Italian-American, and I live in the Park Place neighborhood of Norfolk. So let me give you a little bit of background information before I get to my question. Every time I talk to my white friends about where I live, there's all these gasps. Oh, my God, you live in Park Place. Oh, that must be so dangerous. I used to live over by ODU, and I tell you one thing, I feel a lot safer in Park Place than I ever felt. I feel a lot safer.
Well, actually, it's not ODU. It's the ODU neighborhood. So let's not diminish ODU.
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other thing is I'm building a community garden right off of 29th. Now, in trying to get community support, You know, all the African Americans I talk to think it's a beautiful idea. I think it's awesome. Anytime I talk to a white person, oh, that's never going to work. Oh, those kids will trash it. You can't do that there. And it's like, how is that acceptable? So my question is, what is the place for conscious white people in this country in this debate on police actions towards minorities, citizen actions toward minorities? Just the other day, I saw 2 kids get stopped crossing Colonial. Now, people cross Colonial all the time. They looked, they were black. A cop came by, pulled them over for jaywalking. That, said, "You're not under arrest. If you were," and I quote, "you'd already be on the ground right now." How is that an acceptable comment for a white officer to say to a 17-year-old young black man? And what idea does that give to that guy, to the 17-year-old? Now, my question is, what can I do about this? Where is my role in this debate as a conscious white man who recognizes that we're all equal?
Okay, we're going to get the panel to talk about that. Chris, thanks for sharing. Go ahead, Will.
I want to commend Chris, because Chris is absolutely speaking to what I'm talking about. Chris, somehow, through his life experience, got to a point where he's respecting people as human beings, and he's working his way to get past all of this. And this is why I say that we need to present opportunities, whether we learn it in school, in church, or at home, where we are learning how we can talk to each other in this way, because it's not enough to just talk. You have to even know how to talk, because you know what could happen to Chris and the other one, Dawn, is that as soon as they begin to talk and say, "Look, I really want to understand this," you'll get a conservative Negro like this one over here who will want to go and bash them over the head and then say, "Look, I just want to be honest and try to understand it. I want to try to get to a point where we relate." And that's what we need.
Do that
yes,
also.
Absolutely.
That is a very
because
good point.
On both sides of the spectrum, they have a vested interest to keep it there. They have a vested interest because that's what keeps them in the public eye, in the public square. But at the end of the day, do we get to a better society?
To say something specific to what Chris just said, though, I would hope that he would take it a step further and report it to Virginia. To Norfolk police officials to say, "Hey, I saw this. It happened at this time of day on this particular date. I thought this was wrong. This is why I thought it was wrong." Right. This was the car number that he was driving at that particular time. And I think that was unacceptable, and this is why I think that's unacceptable.
So if enough people start to point it out and complain about it, then it will change. Let's go to Maurice on line 3. Maurice, you're on the air.
Hi. I'm originally from Rapid City, South Dakota, and I currently live in Norfolk on 43rd and Kellam, right near ODU. So it's very dangerous around there. I just wanted to comment that I feel like you guys are only speaking from the minority point of view, and you aren't considering that this was a circumstantial case where the guy might have actually been afraid, as I would have been if I was in my own neighborhood and I saw someone walking in my direction or just kind of walking through. I think that the government is dealing with it within their own set of laws that might not really be fair, but they're not dealing with it racially. I think that it was a circumstantial case. The guy might have been racist. I don't know, but I don't think it has reason to blow up into a national moral debate.
Okay, Maurice, we appreciate your call. Just so that you know, this show is called Another View, and we do speak from an African-American perspective. But to react to the rest of his comment, Roger.
It would be interesting to know how many times he's been stopped. I think almost every black male in this country who has been behind a wheel of a car can point to a time where they felt they were stopped and they shouldn't have been. Not, well, I was going over the speed limit. I've been stopped at least twice where I felt there was no reason to do that. Once when I got in my car early in the morning, and I was on my way to work in a small New Jersey town. And when the officer stopped me shortly before I left town limits, he never gave me a reason for why he stopped me. I said, "Officer, hands on the wheel. Officer, here's my license. Here's my registration." When he brought it back after not finding any illegalities with me, I said, "Officer, I leave at this time every morning to get to work. I don't understand why you stopped me." And he had no answer for me. And I think that is one of the sometimes people who haven't had that experience, they don't understand how grinding that is to them. And you can't negate that. You can't just overlook that.
But we have to look in the mirror. We have to look in the mirror. over 252,000 black people have died at their own hands. Over 4% of those is black on black. Just as recent in Norfolk, you have some idiot shooting each other up in some restaurant or something. In Hampton, you had somebody, idiots, black, shooting up in somebody's house, shooting this little 8-year-old girl. A year ago, it was a little nice, beautiful African-American student. And then you have these hustles with Reverend Sharpton and Reverend Jackson going there exploiting these situations instead of us looking at how this white guy sees us. This guy that was just on the phone fears us. That's what he said. And he, to some reason, has a point. Because you see all this murder and mayhem, and nobody, we're down at Norfolk State praying, or we're down in my community praying for these black kids. Why don't somebody get up and do something?
Okay. Go ahead, Roger.
I just want to say, yes, you know, in 2008, 93% of black victims were murdered by blacks. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that there aren't a whole lot of other black people who are doing the right thing. So that's the first thing.
I agree.
So, and secondly, there are organizations out there working to try to deal with this, you know, it sounds like almost suicide that we as a people are doing among ourselves. We need to talk more about that, too. And I wish there was the reaction to that similar to what the reaction has been to what happened down in Florida.
So meaning the reaction that when we kill each other, nobody's marching in the streets, nobody's raising saying about
Where's
it.
Jesse? Where's Al Sharpton? Where are they?
Well, they were at Trayvon Martin.
Excuse me?
They were at Trayvon Martin.
Because they're on TV. The Reverend has a TV show.
Listen, the truth of the matter is, just as what was said earlier in the show, that case was not getting the attention. And so those guys were contacted, and by them bringing attention to it, it has risen it to the level where it's at.
End of the day,
your point is well taken, because I've said it before, and I've written about this before, that we need to be as equally energetic and concerned and wearing hoodies in the pulpit as it concerns black on black crime as well. But again, that caller's response is a legitimate but typical response, because as Roger pointed out, his reality of how he sees the police and walking around the neighborhood is that police are protectors. My reality as a kid coming up, police will have me face down on concrete just for walking around looking suspicious. So how do we unlearn this? Because we learned it. No baby comes into the world knowing racism and having all these stereotypes. So how do we learn it?
Well,
just a real quick point. I know you got to go to a call. When I grew up and was able to carry a gun and have a gun, the police had a gun and I had a gun.
But then what's going to happen, Bill, if we're all carrying guns?
The end game is both of you dead.
No,
and the chances are you're going to be dead because he's going to be a better shot.
No,
he's going to be a better shot.
Okay, hold on one at a time so we can make sure we get through. But seriously, Bill, I want to ask you the question. If all of us are carrying guns, then what happens? Are we going to just annihilate the whole race? Meaning the whole human race?
That's just an exaggeration. That's not going to happen.
Okay.
We're doing a pretty good job right now.
We're exercising our constitutional rights.
Okay. Let's go to Dan on line 2. Hi, Dan from Newport News.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I'd like to say, first of all, that racism is still alive and well here as federal law holds it down somewhat. And when this law came that was passed in Florida, it was not passed in Virginia when it was proposed here because the leadership of Virginia feared this very thing happening. And I'd like to point out that, probably 30 days ago, I was at a candidate was running for office. The person is holding local office and is elected right now. She's running for re-election. And it was primarily older white people there at the meeting. And then it started getting a bit racist until finally one of the elderly gentlemen said, well, we wouldn't have so many problems in our schools if we just went back to segregation. And I said, all right, here I am sitting here in a political meeting, and you're letting this guy say this. Another elected official who was there said, that's just how he is. He's not really a racist. And I said, no, these are the people that are funding you. And if you get elected to office and you're allowing them to say this, there's a problem here. And then another case, just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with one of the Virginia Republican Party leadership, lower level leadership people. and we were talking about Bobby Scott being redistricted, and he was joking about it. He said, Dan, he said, a lot of the better people in the Republican Party know that if we could ever beat Bobby Scott, if we ever got it redistricted that way so that we could beat him and a few others in the majority districts, that we'd be back in time 50 years in just a matter of a few days. But we cannot let that happen.
Thanks for the call, Dan. We really appreciate your sharing your comments. Carol, you had a visceral reaction to what Dan was saying.
Yes, I did, because it goes back to something. Oh, Lord, I'm going to quote Bill.
Thank you.
It goes back to us being politically active. Yes, we can respond to these emergency situations and we can have talks. But as we said, and yesterday, we did have a panel at Norfolk State that talked about the social, cultural, but also the political agenda and how we could be proactive in getting legislators who are responsive to our needs and who are aware of the situation. And the students actually came up with saying, well, let's have a voter registration drive in which we get into the community and we help people to get qualified and get IDs and everything. So I think the caller plus Bill, unfortunately, I hate to quote you.
Thank you.
On the right
I keep
track.
wondering, how are we going to unlearn this stuff? How are we going to unlearn it? How we the perception, the stereotype that apparently based on the call that Zimmerman brought to that situation. How are we going to unlearn that? That's what created the situation.
You wait till you unlearn it, and I'll remember the Second Amendment.
Hang on a second. Let's go to Mary, who I think is calling us from Hampton. I'm not sure. Hi, Mary. You're on the air.
Hi there. Actually, I'm sitting in the parking lot at MacArthur Mall.
Oh, okay, Mary.
I'm calling to tell you a couple of things. First of all, one of my very best friends was this is just a terrible thing. The police had stopped her as she was going to pick up one of my children from school, and they told her it was because she had a gold van, and she was suspected of carrying drugs because someone with a gold van was known to be transporting drugs at the time. And she was in a suit, African-American, in a suit with two toddlers in the back of the car. And they made her wait for 40 minutes at the side of the road with her two toddlers while they pulled every single thing out of her car. As many times as she said, I'm in a suit, I'm carrying two toddlers, on my way to pick up another child from school. Do I look like someone who would be carrying drugs? You can't find anything. I mean, how long am I going to have to stand here? And they just made her stand there and wait. It was so humiliating for her. We both cried over the humiliation that she went through with that experience. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that I actually graduated from Hampton University.
Amen.
And, yes, go Hampton. And I think I was the oldest and whitest person in every class. and every time I got in there, people would kind of look at me suspiciously, and especially when we would start talking about things like police things that had happened. And I would just, very small classes, I would just explain to people that I understood what was going on. And, I think that talking about prejudice is very important. Mm-hmm. And that we should all do it as often as we possibly can, because everyone needs to understand that there are people who get it, and that we need to stand together.
Mary, let me ask you a quick question. Did going to an HBCU give you a different perspective on African Americans?
It helped me understand young people overall, and it did help me understand their fear and perspective a lot more. I've always had African American friends, so it didn't really change my perspective about African Americans. No, but I've always had. I'm from Ohio. Moving here changed my perspective about how African Americans have been treated so much more so than I ever understood when I lived in Ohio. My husband and I both have been so shocked for 28 years since we moved here. And then moving from Chesapeake to Suffolk was going back in time.
50 years. Where were you from? This is Bill Thomas. Where did you live in Ohio?
In Dayton.
Oh, okay. Good. I got a good friend from Dayton.
All right. We only have a couple minutes left, so we're going to have to go. Thank you so much for your call, Mary. I appreciate it. So we've got about 2 minutes left. What do we want to leave people with in terms of how do we tackle this race thing? Anybody?
I think that talking is a beginning, but it's not enough. You have to actually have experiences. You have to actually go through the same process that you learned all of this stuff is the same process that we have to go through to unlearn it as a culture, so that the next wave of young people that's coming through are not picking up the same perceptions and negative attitudes that was there at that confrontation with Trayvon and Mr. Zimmerman.
Okay, Bill?
I believe that the situation exists. I don't believe that talking is going to do too much more about it. I think we have to. I don't see a bad thing with having resegregating schools, to tell you the truth. And I just think
that's another whole conversation.
I think
we don't have time right now.
I just think we need to look in the mirror as an African American race and take control.
Schools are desegregated.
Okay.
Take control of our situation.
And vote.
Okay, talk and vote. And Roger.
I would hope that every time we get exercise about something that happened to the young man in Florida, we get just as exercise at the mindless, constant number of folks being killed, shot dead in our own streets, often by people of our own race.
Okay, and with that roundtable, thank you. I love talking to you all as usual, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, and it's time now for things to view and do in Hampton Roads.
You will be my Saturday love.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
The 4th annual Sidewalk Sale for Success is tomorrow, Saturday, March 31st, from 9 until 5 to benefit the Hampton Roads Dress for Success program. The sale will be held rain or shine at 4000 Colley Avenue in Norfolk. New and like new jackets, suits, shoes, handbags, and accessories are available. Visit Hampton Roads at dressforsuccess.org for more information. Also, tomorrow evening in Portsmouth, there will be a candlelight vigil to remember those who've lost their lives to illness and to bring awareness of the need for a national electronic health records database. The vigil is from 6 to 8 p.m., sponsored by Kiana Beale and the Kingdom Stewards Ministries, and will be held at the church on Camden Avenue in Portsmouth. Call 757-701-8295 for more information. On Sunday, April 1st, Old Dominion University holds its 4th annual International Festival featuring the Global Marketplace, international food, cultural performances, and global educational displays. The festival runs from noon until 5 at the Ted Constance Center. Everyone is invited. Call 757-683-4406 for more information. And the 900 Men Strong Prayer Breakfast is coming to Hampton Roads on Saturday, April the 14th at 8:30 a.m. at the Chesapeake Conference Center. Maryland Congressman Elijah Cummings is the keynote speaker. Men of all ages are invited to become a part of this region-wide effort to stand up and make a difference through education. Call 757-627-7222 for registration information. And finally, the Hermitage Museum and Gardens is accepting applications for its Kids Summer Art Camp. There are 9 themed weeks available from June through August. Call 757-423-2052, extension 207, to find out more. And that's our show for this Friday. If you missed part of today's show or would like to hear it again, visit our website, anotherviewradio.org. There you'll find podcasts of previous programs, and please sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. For producer Lisa Godley, audio engineer Perry Smith, Courtney Jackson, who did a great job today answering our phones, I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fabulous weekend, and we'll see you next Friday at noon for Another View.